Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how I made this zip top bag. This is a design from Parker on the Porch and it's called their vertical splash zip bag. Now I think it's made originally for you to put like items in it that you want to protect, you know, from water, maybe so like in a beach bag or something like that, and it comes in various sizes. And the whole idea of it is that this section here on the front is clear vinyl, and then obviously you can see what's inside it. I didn't particularly want the clear vinyl, so I made mine by replacing the vinyl with a piece of fabric, but I only used a single layer of fabric. So when you open the zip up, this piece on the inside here is the wrong side of this. But the back is two pieces of fabric. That's how the pattern is made. This one I made here is the 5x7, or for the 5x7 hoop. And I've used the Winnie the Pooh fabric, which is available from makersuperstore.com. And then I used some white fabric for the top and bottom, which I already had in my stash. So today I'm going to make the next size up. So that's for the 6x10 hoop. Now I'll be using my 8x12 hoop, but I'm going to be using the 6x10 design. And again, I'm going to replace the front panel with fabric. But this time what I've done, I've sewn two pieces of fabric together and ironed it so that when I place this fabric where it needs to go, it's going to have like right side of fabric on the outside and on the inside, if that makes sense. So again, this is Winnie the Pooh fabric from Maker Superstore. It's lovely. This is a kind of lovely bluey tealy grey colour. So I'm going to be using that. I've got all the elements I need, all prepared. You don't need to put any iron on or anything like that on this. This particular fabric here, the plain fabric, is fabric that I've had in my stash for a while, and it's from IKEA, and it actually matches perfectly. So this is what I'm going to be using for the top and bottom section on the front. And the reason that I wanted to make a little bag is, some of you may know I've recently bought a new combined sewing and embroidery machine. I sold my Janome Memory Craft and I've bought the Brother Innovis V5 LE, which is an amazing machine. And the hoop size that I got with this machine is 12x8, which is a big hoop. Also came with a smaller hoop. I think it was a 4x4, but it's the big one I've been using the most. And when I got my machine, it came with all extra bits and pieces, you know, things that you don't use very often, but you know you need to keep. And I didn't want to store them in the storage in the machine. So that's why I decided to make a little zipper pouch. I've made loads of zipper pouches before on my YouTube channel. If you go into the sewing playlist, you'll find loads, but this one is all done in the hoop. So you may have heard that expression before if you're new to sewing. A lot of the times you'll see ITH and that's short for in the hoop. So from start to finish, this is all done completely in the hoop. And I've just stored the things in it, as I say, that came with my machine, bits of extra, you know, pieces, the spare bobbin race, all that kind of thing. But, you know, just so they're all together, they're not taking up space actually within the storage compartment of my machine, but I know where they all are. They're in a drawer with my embroidery threads. So that was why I wanted to have a go at the design. So if you're new to machine embroidery, this design, although it is an in the hoop, is very easy to put together. There's a PDF step-by-step instructions that come with the stitch file. But as I say, it's very easy. So if you've never done an in the hoop project before and you've got an embroidery or a combined sewing and embroidery machine like I have, then this is an easy project to start with. So I'm going to swap over to my machine now and I'll tell you everything that I've done so far. So as I said, I've got my 12x8 hoop already in the machine with tearaway stabilizer. Okay, so I've inserted the USB stick because that's where the design is that I sent over from my computer. I'm going to go into edit, into USB, and I'm going to scroll down and find the bigger design, because the one I did yesterday is the smaller design I've just shown you in the white fabric. So this is the design here. So I'm going to select embroidery, although I know you can't see it, but it does say embroidery in the bottom right hand corner of my machine. And that's now put this design on the screen. I'm just going to click this button just to make sure it is in the center, and it is. And the first thing I'm going to do is do the placement stitch for where the zip goes. So I'm going to put the foot down on my machine. I don't want to keep moving you from view to view. So I think it's the sewing probably that's more important, but I'll try and keep the screen in as well if I can. So I'm going to put the foot down on the machine and I'm going to press start. Everything's loaded up. I've got my embroidery thread in the top. I've got my bobbin fill in the bottom. So we should be good to go. Okay, so that's finished step one. So you need to line up the zip now. Now I know that you're not going to be able to see this because I've stitched it in white on white stabilizer, but basically I'll just run you through what you've got. Just trying to turn the brightness down a little bit for you. So you've got the outline of the actual bag itself, and then here where you're not probably going to be able to see, there are 3 stitch lines. I'm using just a continuous zip. I've threaded it up already, and this is a number 3 zip. I think you could probably use a number 5. A number 5 would just extend below and above the 3 stitch lines. I'll just try and mark on here with pen. I'm not sure how well you're going to see this. So you should be able to see the 3 marks here, and I just can't get to mark this side, but basically that's where your zip goes, and the teeth of your zip need to be lined up with this middle line here. And until, you know, recently, back end of 2020 and into 21, I'd not used my embroidery machine probably for, you know, too long really. I couldn't find the masking tape I used to use to, you know, hold things down. So I asked several people what they used, and the majority still seem to use masking tape. So I've got myself a new supply of masking tape. Some people said, I think it was the frog tape, the green tape, which they said was just like masking tape but green. Other people told me they use micropore tape, which I do have because we're allergic to plasters in our house. But I'm going to stick with masking tape for now. So with the zip facing up, and the pull on one side, depending on which side you want to open it. So my bag, if I show you the black one here, opens from left to right. So I started with the pull on the left, and that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to line up the wrong side of the teeth, so the back of the teeth, with this middle line. And basically, if you use a number 3 zip, your zip will fit right in the middle of the outer top 2 of those 3 lines. And I'm just going to tape it down. You don't have to, but I'm just going to tape it down just while I'm filming. So I'm going to tape it down to the stabilizer outside where the stitch line is. So this is the stitch line, so I'm just going to tape it down over here out of the way. And I'll just see, I don't want to keep taking the hoop in and out. I'm going to try and, you know, do, there's going to be obviously steps like the next step where I've got to, but I'm trying to do it so that I don't have to keep getting in the way. Okay, so I'm going to put the foot down. I've got the zipper out of the way. If you're using a regular zip with a pull and a stopper, you just need to make sure that your pull and your stopper extend beyond the outer stitch mark. Okay, so let's just do the next step. It doesn't matter what's going on the screen. This literally, you don't need to look at the screen after this. It will stop at each section for you. So I'm going to say go. This is going to sew the zipper to the stabilizer, and it's going to give you a stitch line which you'll then use for placing your fabric. It's going to stop, it's going to jump over the teeth and come back down the other side, and then I will have to take it out of the hoop in a minute. Okay, so I'm just going to pull the hoop out of the machine. I'm not unhooping the stabilizer, just bringing the hoop out of the machine. So this is what we've got so far, and obviously my zip was a lot longer and I know I don't need all that, so I'm just going to chop it off now because I can use that piece of zip on another project. So I'm going to remove the masking tape because that's all held in place now. So what I need to do now is bring in my fabric that's going to be for the top. So the fabric that I'm using doesn't have a right or a wrong side. So basically how this is going to work, this is going to be at the top like this. So obviously you don't want the raw edges showing, so you're going to flip it over and you're going to line the edge of your fabric just above the zip and where the stitch line is. And obviously you need to make sure that your fabric extends beyond the outside of your bag. So it needs to go something like that. And then I'm just going to tape it down. Then I'm going to flip the hoop over. So this is, as I'm looking at it, this is the right side up. So if I put top up here, then you'll know which way I've got this orientated, hopefully. So I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to bring in another one of my pieces of fabric and I'm going to do the same, and you can see where the other one is, so you're just going to line it up on top of that fabric and just make sure that it extends. Not quite cut this as long as the other one, but it is longer than my stitch line, so that's fine. So I'm going to line it up with the top of where the other one is and stick this down. Now because this is going to be on the underside of the machine, I'm just going to use an extra long piece, and then when I put this back in the machine I'm going to make sure that it's still all nice and neat. So I'm not putting the tape where the stitch lines are. It doesn't matter if you do stitch through it, masking tape will peel away, you know, fairly easily, but I'm just trying to avoid that. So I've got a piece on the back and a piece in the same place on the front. So this is now going to go back into the machine. It's going to sew a stitch line along here, which will anchor both the front and the back piece in place. Then I'm going to have to remove it and flip the fabric. So I've not touched anything on the machine at all other than to unlock my hoop. So I'm just going to slide my hoop back in, lock it back into place, put the foot down on my machine and press start. I'm just going to make sure I can see the fabric underneath and I can see it's all nice and flat, so that should be fine. Okay, so I can unhoop it again and bring it back to my desk. So now I can peel away the masking tape I'll do the front first, and then this needs to flip up. Now you need to make sure that the instructions do tell you for every size that this file includes. It tells you how big to cut your fabric, but you need to make sure that once it's flipped up that your fabric extends beyond the outside stitch line. Okay, and that's because obviously if it doesn't, then it's not going to go together properly. So I'm just pushing this out with my fingers. I mean, this is, you know, quilting cotton kind of fabric, so it's easily pressed, and I'm just going to stick it back down. As I say, if you're used to sewing, and then, you know, some people would just leave this as it is and just make sure that it doesn't get caught up under the foot, but I'm just going to do it this way. So I'm going to turn this over and do exactly the same. So I'm just going to pull away the masking tape, flip up the fabric and just ease it out with my fingers, and then I'm going to stick it back down because it is obviously underneath the hoop. So then this needs to go back into the machine, and it's going to sew the stitch around the top to hold that in place. So again, wherever the machine stopped, that's, you know, where it stops. I don't move anything, I don't touch the screen, I literally just unlock the hoop and pull it out. So I'm going to put the foot down and press start. Okay, so again, I'm going to take it out of the hoop. So with these in the hoop designs, it's just literally a case of following the steps. There really is nothing difficult in them. So I'm just taking the tape off the front. I'm going to leave it on the back with that being on the underside of the hoop. As I said, this is where you would normally put your piece of vinyl, and I don't want vinyl. So I've got my piece of fabric that's, you know, 2 layered, and I'm going to lay this down now up under the zip and making sure that it extends beyond these stitch lines. I'm just double checking because one of my piece of fabrics isn't as wide as the other. But that's fine, that's okay. So I'm going to position this so it extends beyond these outside stitch lines and push it up to the zip. And again, I'm just going to use a bit of tape just to hold it at the top, just while this gets tacked down. Okay, so that's going to go back into the machine and it's going to do the next step. So put the foot down and start. Okay, so unlock the hoop, slide it out. So again, I can remove the masking tape. I'll just keep that because I'll probably need it again in a few minutes. Now, obviously, I've cut this piece longer than I need because the bottom piece needs to go on. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to bring in my little embroidery scissors and I'm just going to trim right across to cut this piece off here that I don't need. And I'm going to be about 1/4 inch from the seam. In fact, I'm going to use my ordinary scissors. I think I can probably get in better. with my ordinary scissors. So I'm not going right up to the stitch line, I'm leaving about 1/4 of an inch. Only cutting the fabric, not cutting the stabiliser. Well, that's what I'm trying to do anyway. So that's what we've got now. So now it's a case of putting the bottom section on. So this is the same. If your fabric was directional, you'd need to make sure that your direction of your fabric was right, looking at you, and then you'd flip it over, okay? And then again, you bring it down. So you want to come below this stitch mark that's holding this piece of pattern fabric, and you obviously need to extend beyond the outside of the bag. So I'm just going to bring it down basically to the bottom of where I've just trimmed it. I'm going to use this piece of tape again just to hold that in place. Then I'm just going to flip the hoop over and do exactly the same. But again, I know I've got to come beyond this stitch line here that's holding this pattern fabric in place. So again, if your fabric had a direction, you'd position your fabric so that it's looking at you the right way, and then you'd flip it and bring it down. So again, I'm coming down, I can see where the bottom of the pattern is, so that's all I need to be able to line up with, and extend it on the outside. And I'm just going to bring in some more masking tape and just hold this in place. And to be fair, I think there's only a couple more steps now and this is nearly done. So I'm not pressing too hard when I press down the masking tape as well, because I don't want to move the stabiliser, because it can move. I don't really need these pieces on the top anymore, but again, because this is under the hoop, I'm just leaving them in place for now. So I'm just going to flip the hoop back over and put that back in the machine. And again, it's going to sew this stitch line that's going to anchor the front to the back. Then we flip down and then it does the next section. I'm going to put the foot down and press go. Just trying to bring this in so you can see. So I'm going to remove the masking tape from the top. And again, fold it down. Just, pull it down so it's nice and taut, and press it down with your fingers. And, if you want to hold this one in place while it's sewing, that's entirely up to you. I'm just going to put a bit of tape back on it. And as much as I can, when I'm taping, I tape outside the stitch line. I'm going to flip it over and do exactly the same on the back. So it's just a case of following, step by step. Pull this down, press it with my fingers and tape it back into place. Sometimes you do feel as though you need about 3 hands, but it's easy, it's doable. Okay, so that goes back into the machine. Put the foot down and go. Okay, so I'm going to remove that masking tape, and you don't need to worry about, I'll just try and move up so you can see, you don't need to worry about all this waste here, because this will all get cut away when we, you know, trim it all up once it's finished. The most important thing you need to do now is open your zip. If you don't open your zip at this point, you'll not be able to get into your bag. You want to open your zip enough, because this is what's known as doing like a double, we flip it twice basically. So at some point you're going to have to flip this back out through the zip. So you need to open the zip as much as possible to be able to get inside it. But you don't want your zipper pull opening so it's anywhere near this outer stitch line, because the foot could hit it. So I always open mine to about a finger's width, like so. And I always point the pull in to the centre of the fabric. That's just the way I've done things. You need to get your outer fabric with the direction in the right orientation, and then you flip it over, and you're going to put this right side down, and you need to extend beyond all this outer stitch line now. Try and bring it in so you can see it. So it extends beyond the stitch line here, it extends beyond the stitch line here, and above and below. And if at all possible, try and have more on the bottom hanging over, because the first flip that you do is through the bottom. So the more fabric you've got here, the easier it will be to seal up the lining, because this is a fully lined zipper bag. So that's going to go like that. I'm just going to put a little bit of tape just on the top and the bottom, because I just want to flip the hoop over and see what's going on underneath. I could hear some of the masking tape moving. Okay, so I'm not doing the bottom, just the top. That's all you're putting into place. The top of the fabric face down, covering all of the stitch line. And then this goes back in the machine. So just to remind you, before you go any further, when you get to this stage, whenever you put in your outer piece of fabric on, your zip has to be open. Okay, foot down, start. And it's just going to go round several times, and it will go over the zip, but because you left the pull facing inwards, it's not going to hit that zip. And once you know it's been round once and cleared everything, then you know it's all going to be fine. It does another line slightly inside this, and then I think from memory it does another line on this outside as well. So it's stitched down several times, obviously, to make the bag secure. So I can remove the masking tape off the front now. And then I'm just going to flip this over. So this is still the top up here. I'm just flipping it over. I'm going to remove all this masking tape, and having this machine now that's got the bigger capacity and the bigger hoops means that I can obviously create a lot more bigger projects, which is lovely. I mean, my Janome had a decent size hoop. I think the smallest hoop was a 5.5 by 5.5, and I think the biggest one was about 8 or 9 by 7. But this, as I say, is an 8 by 12, so this is a monster compared to what I've had previously. Right, I'm just going to trim up some of the threads. I'm not cutting the knots, I'm just trimming away some of the threads. So now again, this is still the top, but I'm on the back. So again, you need to bring your fabric in. You want to look at it so it's right side up and flip it over. And then again, you know, you might be able to see better here on the, this is what you've got to cover, okay? And you want to try and leave more overhang down at the bottom. Doesn't matter if you've got at the top as well, if you've cut your fabric bigger than the pattern suggested, but you just try and leave more at the bottom because that's where we're going to flip it through first time. So this is face down, covering everything. Now because this is on the back, I am going to take it down again. And basically what this is going to do now, it's going to sew all around, but it's going to leave an opening in the bottom for turning. So I'm just going to put 4 strips on this, just to make sure that it holds it in place when I push it back into the hoop. So this is more or less finished now. So you can see it is an easy project if you take it step by step. So let's go back to the machine and let's stitch the last section. Okay, that's it, done. So we can unlock and bring the hoop out. Just going to zoom back out a little bit. So this is it. So it can be unhooped now. Just going to put my hoop out of the way and bring this in. So this is the front. This is where I wrote top earlier on. And this is stitched all the way around. If we flip it over and I remove this masking tape, masking tape, I think, or any kind of decent tape for in the hoop project is your best friend. Right, so I'm just going to try and get this in. I'm not sure how well you're going to see this, but on the back it's sewn round and it's left this gap here. And this is your turning gap. So now, because this was a tearaway stabiliser, I'm just going to rip out all the stabiliser. And again, I don't know if there's a right or wrong way, but I kind of peel the fabric back and pull it out. And the stitches, you know, perforate it and it makes it come out nice and clean. So you can see at the top here, I didn't leave a lot of overhang from the stitch, but I did at the bottom because that's where I want to seal it up. Okay, so that's all the stabiliser out of the way. Now you need to trim it all the way around, and it's entirely up to you how you do it. You can do it with a rotary cutter, you can do it with scissors, but what you do need to do, let me bring my pen back in and see, I don't know how well you'll see this. So where you've got your opening here, you don't want to cut a lot into this section. So you're going to cut round the outside about, you know, 1/4 inch from your stitch line, but don't cut. Leave this section here intact. It will help you seal the inside up when you turn it. You can trim a little bit down, but you know, don't come straight across here because it'll be difficult to seal up. That's all I'm trying to say. So I tend to cut up, if I use scissors, I cut up and I do this bit first, so I know I'm not cutting into here. So I'll cut up here, and then I'll cut round like so. I'm going to use scissors, save me bringing in my rotary cutter. So I'm going to cut up here to about 1/4 of an inch from the cut line, from the stitch line. So there's my stitch line, and here's where I'm finishing my cutting. Then I'm going to turn and go all the way around. And you want to trim away, you know, quite a bit of the bulk, but you don't want to get that close to your stitches that you cut through them. And you're just going to cut up right through the zip. It doesn't matter that we're cutting the zip off, because obviously we left the zip open. You just need some scissors that are perhaps not your best scissors for doing this, you know, with going all through your fabric and your zip. And again, when I come round here, I'm going to keep to about 1/4 of an inch around the stitching and then go straight down. I'm not going across here. Because if you think about it, if you were making this in the traditional way with your sewing machine, you'd have like a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, wouldn't you, where you normally turn things through. Just missed a bit of the fabric there, so let's just get rid of all the rubbish. So this is how it's looking on the sealed side. Just be careful, because I have got a little bit close to the stitching on this side. So it's probably best if you cut it from the side that's completely sealed. But I'm okay, I've got 2 rows of stitching, so I'm fine. I haven't actually cut the stitching, but I'm pretty close. So what you're going to do now, you're going to turn this through the opening. And this is why you need to leave some extra. But what I'm going to do, now I've got it, the bulk of it cut, I am going to trim this down a little bit, but I'm going to leave more than I've left on the sides. It's just so that I can see it better now. And I'm just going to come across in a straight line. So I've got probably about 3/8, just under a half there. So you want to be able to get into where the opening is. Okay, so you can see I can get my hand in here. So I'm going to reach in, go for one of the far corners and start to pull this through this opening. Now obviously there's always stress where you've left an opening, so just take your time, but it leaves, you know, a decent size opening, and this is the bigger one than the first one I showed you, and it's obviously left a bigger opening. But even on the 5x7 hoop design, it left enough for me to get this through. So I'm just poking out the corners, and I'm just going to flatten it out a little bit. So this is kind of what you've got now. And I use, I've said this before, if you follow me on YouTube, you'll know, this is an old, I can't even read what it says, but it's an old embossing tool, but with a big fat stylus end. And I use this a lot in my sewing projects. I love it. It's great for getting into, you know, turning stuff out. So basically, this is what we've got now. And you're thinking, yeah, you've sewn that together wrong, because all I can see is stabiliser. But hang on in there with me. It will all make sense in a minute. So we need to close up, because this is effectively the inside of the bag. We won't see this, but we need to close up this gap. And this is normally where you leave a gap in a lining when you're doing it in the traditional way. And as I said, you normally have a seam allowance, and by leaving that extra bit on the bottom, that acts as your seam allowance. The way I found easiest for me to do this is have it so that I can see the side with the 2 lines of stitching. So this is the side that was completely sealed. And then you can cut away some of the other bulk if you want. So basically where your opening is, you want the piece where your opening is and the piece next to it. They're the 2 pieces you want to keep. And you can cut some of this extra away if you want before you turn it, but it's fine. It's not very thick fabric, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. So I'm going to turn this in now on that bottom stitch line. Let me see if I can zoom in. Okay, so where I've got the 2 stitch lines, I'm going to fold it in on that bottom lower stitch line, and I'm just going to press it with my fingers. And because it's kind of like double stitch line, it will stay in place. So you want to press it down and then you want to fold in your other piece to line up with it. And this is going to be your inside of your bag. So I've literally folded in on the 2 lines of stitching, and then this outer piece I've folded in. Now there's several ways you can do this, as there always is. So you could pop this into your sewing machine and stitch that closed. You can hand stitch it, or you can glue it with fabric glue, or you can use a fabric double-sided tape. I've just got a thread there that's hanging out. I'm just trying to get that out of the way. So what I'm going to use this seaming tape, because this is going to be on the inside. It's going to be at the bottom of the bag. It's not going to be seen. So I'm just going to measure a piece of this tape and cut it. This is that kind of hemming stuff. There's also double-sided tape for fabric that you could use. And I'm going to slide this in so it goes right to the edge of the opening. I may have cut this a little bit too big. I think I have, so I can trim this down a little bit. So I'm kind of holding where I've hand pressed. Put this in. Slide it into place. I think this is the fiddliest bit, and this isn't difficult. And once that's in position, I'm just going to take this to the iron and I'm going to press it, and that's going to fuse that closed. Okay, so that's all sealed up now at the bottom on the inside. So now you need to get rid of all this stabiliser, and then we're going to flip the bag the right way out. So the easiest way to do it is to try and get hold of the zip and pull this apart. It should rip apart. And again, I find just holding it where I'm ripping just helps it all rip away nicely, because obviously the needle pierces it. So you just want to rip away as much as you can, and then you should be able to pull on the zip and get this to open, because you left your zip open. Obviously, if you didn't leave your zip open, then this is where you're going to struggle. You will find there's a thread as well, and that's the kind of the placement line. So just pull that, and you might have, let me just bring in my little scissors, you might have, to snip it. So now it's a case of just tidying up all the rest of this stabiliser. So I'm just going to tidy all this up, get as much of the stabiliser as I can. Little bit again here. Again, as I say, if you hold your fabric where you're pulling your stabiliser away, it just pulls away nicely. Just takes a little bit more time on the zip bit, because you've literally only got, a 1/4 of an inch or something of stabiliser. That all looks okay. So now I'm going to flip it again. So I'm going to flip it. Doesn't matter whether you do top or bottom, and then flip to get it the right way out. I'm going to bring in my embossing tool again and push this into the corners, and they pop out lovely. But because this is all done in the hoop, it just all, goes together really well. So before I zip it up, so when I used the double layer of fabric instead of the vinyl, on the inside now I've got right side and right side showing on the outside, whereas on this one I only used a single layer. So I've got my right side showing on the outside, but I've got the wrong side showing on the inside, if that makes sense. As I say, it's meant to have, a clear vinyl lining, but I didn't want it to be clear. I didn't need it to be clear, so I'm just making use of the fabric, the pattern, but doing it in another way. So zip it up, I'll give it a quick press. Okay, so there it is. What do you think about that? Love it. This IKEA fabric really goes well with this Maker's Superstore Winnie the Pooh fabric. So that's it. So fully made in a hoop on an embroidery machine. Only one seam on the inside lining that you've got to deal with by hand. And as I say, that's easy to do because you can use fabric glue, you can use that steamer seam tape or whatever it's called that I use, hemming tape. So that's it. So patterned on the front, plain top and bottom, fully patterned on the back, fully lined inside. And this one was made for the 6x10 hoop. So that's the first one, the 5x7. This one, as I say, was for the 6x10. And then I think there are two, at least I think two other sizes. I think there's an 8x8, you know, that you can make for an 8x8 hoop. And I think there's one for my hoop, the 12x8. So they would just keep, you know, going bigger. But what a great, simple project. Minimal supplies, all the fabric sizes and everything that you need are within the pattern. I purchased this pattern, I wasn't sent it, I wasn't given it or anything. I purchased it, you know, the reason I purchased it was because I wanted to do an in the hoop zipper bag, and I wanted to make something, as I say, that would house all my bits and pieces. So I purchased this, made it, and just thought once I'd done it that it was such an easy project to make that I'd share it with everybody. So please subscribe to my channel if you don't already do so. I am trying to get to 50,000 subscribers by the end of 2021. YouTube are telling me that a bulk of the people that watch my videos are not subscribed. So please subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. It would just help YouTube know that my channel is popular, and it will push it out to more people that will then be able to find me. Also, please give the video that thumbs up that's underneath the video. That also helps YouTube, you know that people like this kind of content, and it helps more people find it. So that's today's project, a Parker on the Porch vertical zipper splash bag, it's called. So thank you, and I'll see you in